presenter, Mr. Amul, presenting on paradigm of post-humanism and contemporary Romanian poetry in the broader context of Eastern European literature.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me properly? Hello.
Yes, sir, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emanuel Lupascu, and I'm presenting my country, my university, Babeș-Bolyai from Romania. And today I'm going to talk about the dynamics of cultural change in Romania after the fall of the Iron Curtain, in the broader context of transformation that occurred in Eastern European literature after the dissolution of the communist dictatorship. And I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation. Can you please tell if you can see my presentation?
No, sir. Yes, sir. Now it's okay.
Okay, thanks. So first and foremost, my presentation is based on the assumption that there is a deep link between the philosophical thinking of a historical period and the cultural production of a particular nation. The relationship between literature and philosophy occupies an important place in recent paradigm of world literature. Civilization have always been a continuous dialogue and exchange of ideas, books, and cultural experiences that transcends the national boundaries. For example, we cannot imagine Romanticism without the contribution of German Neoplatonic metaphysics, or just as we cannot separate the experience of postmodernism from the philosophy of Derrida, Foucault, or Jean Baudrillard. In this sense, philosophy becomes a phenomenon of the world, regardless of its provenience. And the second assumption concerns how technology and new media have determined a new ontology based on instantaneity, ubiquity, and simultaneity. So, as Lipovetsky stated, the small screen has put people in contact with the whole world, which has become one without borders. So accelerated globalization has determined the infectious nature of cultural phenomena that spread by contagion in the proliferating environment of the web. So in the same way, theories and or philosophies are increasingly being embraced by new generations of writers and researchers as long as they know English and have access to the internet. Critical and philosophical posthumanism have a theoretical and effective adherence compatible with the post-1989 system of Eastern European literature because of the liberalization or decolonization in the case of the Baltic countries that brought with it a redefinition of identity networks, both macro community, and you can see the ethnic and the national community, and micro community identities such as gender, racial, species, class, etc. And the importance of posthumanist theory in the literary system of Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, etc. respects the center semi-periphery dynamic since it originates in the Anglo-American hegemonic cultural space. And this transfer would satisfy both familiarity and exotic mechanism. First of all, the adherence to this theory is due to the ethical component, which follows the postmodern perspective on situated and circumstantial ontology and the deconstruction of the so-called neutral discourse. Secondly, the fascination with the post-human results from the eccentricity of the hybrid figures. It analyzes such as the cyborg, biotechnological chimeras, post-apocalyptic scenarios, etc. These are tropes that are quintessentially post-human, but which do not entail an empathetic attitude towards marginalized, racialized, sexualized community, etc. So for my presentation, I will use two meanings of the term post-humanism. One is belonging to Peter Sloterdijk and the other one to Francesca Ferrando. The first one brings into the light the technological revolution that has replaced the print with the screen, the truth with the post-truth, and has dissolved concepts such as national identity, universal essences, and the transcendent. In other words, post-humanist culture equals digital culture. The cultural fields proliferated with the technological revolutions, the diversification of public spheres, and the means of production of literature. The philosophical dimension of posthumanism I derive from Francesca Ferrando, who defines it as post-humanism, post-anthropocentrism, and post-dualism. In short, it is characterized as by a comprehensive ethical attitude towards possible modes of existence, aware of the fluid identity of humans, materially and culturally rooted. And both dimensions of the post-humanism I have just presented to you, I will analyze concerning Romanian poetry after 2008, because this is a year that marks a triple historical milestone: joining the European Union for Romania, the global economic crisis, and the proliferation of the digital infrastructure. The text I have chosen correspond to the issues raised by post-humanist paradigm as it follows: a poetry that maps new forms of sensibility, but also new aesthetic modes borrowed from new media; a feminist, vascularized poetry that questioned the tradition of patriarchal and macho mentality that dehumanizes women; and an eco-conscious poetry that speculatively and critically thematized the new problem and challenges of the Anthropocene era we are just going through. And in the terms of the new media's impact on the literary field, in the case of Romanian poetry, changes can be observed both at the level of artistic vocabulary and at the level of imagistic construction. In Florentin Popa's poetry, Trips, Heroes, and Love Songs from 2013, the digital is a filter with which insignificant everyday frames are recorded. He masters in his poetry techniques of dodging and enhancing individual micro-events, some nostalgic and vulnerable, other full of virility or gang humor. But the post-human milieu is built upon the ruins of former communism, such as architecture, characters, facts, odors, images, or attitudes, which have survived to this day and which have recently been enjoying increased attention among young people and on the internet, so-called post-Soviet aesthetic. And here you have, I don't have time to read the whole poem, but this is my translation of the poem Granny Mănăștur. Elena Boulder's volume tracks for 2021 align with the post-humanist community, most visibly through the alternative formula of poetry and its challenges. The minimalist eye candy at first glance scenarios, accompanied by a series of tweets and screenshots from Instagram, produce an identity cluster, the avatar of someone born and bred on the internet. The sense of poiesis of technology, which Francesca Ferrando, Apud Heidegger, claims has a speculative valence in Elena Boulder's volume. As you can see, these beautiful lines: I feel closer to people on the internet than to people in real life. I feel my most beautiful when the screen lights up my face. So an important nodal point for the emergence of the posthumanism as a filter through which poetry creatively examines reality is the crystallization of the feminist consciousness within post-communist literature. In Delacroix is Taboo, the Romanian suite from 2017, Medea Iancu writes poems that expose the mechanism through which women have been depreciated on an anthropological scale, both as a local phenomenon, as an universal manifestation. Confronting upfront the religious discourse, it asked the Christian paradigm, which has perpetuated over time a structural contempt for women as an index of sin. The poems are bringing together of all the vulnerabilities that society constructs and perpetuates around women, from the objectification of women to domestic violence, humiliation, and rape as markers of male power and validation. And I quote you from Medea Iancu's poems. They tell me that a poem must be written like this, that a woman must dress like this, that my speech must be like this. And the posthumanist vision is most easily found in what can be identified as an echo poetry, which emerged in the 2000 with an anti-capitalist agenda in which critically and speculatively puts post-anthropocentrism at work. Mihok Tamás, a bilingual Romanian-Hungarian poet, articulates in Biocaria Eco-Ritual for 2018 a universe in which humanity bears the stigma of violence and its speciesist arrogance. This is what a post-apocalypse directed by the poet looks like, a disavowed panorama of the effects of capitalism, amalgamating on the principle of post-surrealist insolence, images from the different register of man, conjugated with the vegetable, the objects, and so on. Here you can read for yourself a poet called Ingredients. And concluding remarks, contemporary Romanian poetry can be read from a post-humanist perspective in close relation to the sensibility and imaginary shifts brought about the recent digital culture spread. Volumes dealing with identity issues about the tradition of dehumanization and those connected with the ecological crisis complete the panorama of a post-humanist community that focuses on empathy, solidarity, and care for those in pain. As a result of my theoretical and interpretative approach, we can see how the new sensibility functions in Romanian literature, similar to the Eastern European one, as a legitimizing principle for the post-humanist collective in solidarity with marginalized, sexualized, or racialized communities and aware of a transformation caused by online existence. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right. Is there anyone who would like to question? Is there any question for our first presenter? Okay. How should I take your name? Emil.
Emmanuel, yes.
Emmanuel. Okay. Let me find out if we have anyone who wishes to ask you some question. The topic was very interesting. Do we have anyone? All right. I would like to ask you a question. Why did you name it as post-humanism? Can this post-humanism be can be interchanged with transhumanism? Because you're talking about identity and enhancement of human human race. So can we use transhumanism for this word?
Sure, that's a very good question, and it was a topic that I have discussed with my colleagues in my country. There is a fine line between transhumanism and post-humanism, and that is why I have oftenly used the term post-human, because it is an umbrella term that has both transhumanism and post-humanism. In my presentation, I have referred to post-humanism as an ethical attitude, because as Francesca Ferrando stated, post-humanism is much concerned with the deconstruction of the traditional and canonical white male heterosexual that have inflicted pain on micro communities along the history. And yes, we can sense in the Romanian literature the both senses of the post-human, both transhumanism and post-humanism, but I would like to refer to post-humanism because of its ethical grounding. I hope I
Yeah,
answered your
thank you so
question.
much. Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. With this, we move on to the next presenter. And the next presenter is Anuradha. She's from Department of Music from Tamil Nadu University. May I have you?
Thank you, madam. I hope you can hear me and see me.
Yeah.
Thank
You are very
you.
clear.
And I'm just going to share my screen. You able to see my screen?
Not yet. I cannot see it. If anybody can, please apprise us of it.
Can you see my screen now?
No, madam. I cannot see it.
Just going to share it again.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, now we can.
Oh, thank
Just
you.
showing you are presenting. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. My name is Anuradha Sudarshan. I'm actually from Australia, Western Australia. I'm doing my studies in looking at how an Indian classical dance, Bharatanatyam, can help individuals with Down syndrome. So I thought it was actually quite interesting to see how language plays a very major role in individuals with Down syndrome. So I thought I'll just start with showing us most of the individuals with Down syndrome have a lot of physical symptoms. Things like they've got flattened facial muscles, nose, and their tongue is smaller than us. They've got issues with hands, smaller fingers. So these are all impacts that they have when they're trying to talk to people. So the next part, which is a behavioral patterns, which has got short attention. So their focus is less, poor judgment, slow learning, and delayed language and speech development is one of the major ones. And a lot of his speech pathologists work with these individuals with Down syndrome to make sure they can speak better. So it's because of their cognitive skills that they have, a lot of communication issues have come across, and this has impacted a lot on their social and emotional conditions. So things like just being in the society, because of physical appearance, a lot of people don't communicate to them. These kids struggle to show their emotions. So that shows how important language is. So I thought I'll just show this screen, having the individuals with Down syndrome in the middle box, and a lot of impacts that have been seen by these individuals is their cognitive delay. So thinking in terms of words. So they have less vocabulary to work with. Learning language and learning words is quite hard. They are visual learners, so dance has actually helped them in understanding different hand gestures, facial expressions, different ways of showing things. So that's one of the problems they have. An academic impact. Because of their lack of focus and attention, they have actually struggled a lot, especially learning with language. Cultural identity is another one where, again, due to their physical appearance, that impact has come. This all impacts their social and emotional impacts. They're actually very happy, lovely, bubbly kids who want to be in the society, but because of the language barrier, they struggle to communicate and have a lot of social impact that they face. So I thought I'll just bring back to the topic of this.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Are you moving your slides? Because I cannot see the slideshow. All right. Now it is. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So I was just showing this before, which has got all of the different boxes, and now back to this slide. So I thought I'll just talk back into the topic of the conference, where a lot of similarities or identities between my topic and the topic of the conferences. One was the language and another one was the new learning environment. So these are actually quite minorities, and they've got different ways of learning, especially learning language. So how can the environment be changed so that they could interpret and communicate better in a social and cultural environment? And the diversity with the language skills as well. The most part of my thesis was also looking at how can the teaching methodology or a modified teaching technique can be used to help these kids to learn language better. So my thesis was in teaching Indian classical dance, but as part of that, I also had speech pathologists who came in to help to see how they could learn language. So this is the next slide I have, which says issues related to learning language. So at least 50 to 60% of individuals with Down syndrome also have hearing problems. Because of that, the learning or the words that we talk, they learn through the lip syncing. So having someone in the front teaching them actually makes a lot of difference. So that is one way of teaching them. The auditory short-term memory and auditory processing. So they struggle to process the words and they would learn better by showing images. So if I'm talking about garden or anything to do with the forest or animals, then it's better to show a picture and then relate to that. So learning spoken language, if that can be taught with different visual images, that makes it much better. Because of the structure of the tongue, as I mentioned earlier, the difficulty in speaking clearly is seen. So they struggle to pronounce the letters and the words. Receptive language and expressive language, they're very visually expressive people, so they can use different visual images or facial expressions and hand gestures to help with learning. Sign language, the most of the individuals with Down syndrome also learn sign language, and learning Indian classical dance with all of the hand gestures and mudras that we do has helped them to learn a bit better at academic schools as well. They've also got problems with breathing and other physical issues. So voice pronunciation, modulation, and managing their breath is another area that could be thought about when you're teaching individuals with Down syndrome. So we have brought yoga and breathing techniques into practice to help these kids. Moving on to the next slide. So I thought it was quite interesting to see how Bharatanatyam is seen as a method of language. So physical movements. So when you're happy, how do you move? So that was something that we could teach them. And when you're sad, what is your body language showing? So that sort of helped them to express their feelings and emotions. The other part of it was more to use their hand gestures. So to show fish, to show bird, to show deer. So we use a lot of hand gestures that could be used to help them to talk and learn language. Music and rhythm was another one where to show their emotions, they're very creative. You play a music, they would dance just naturally. So it was a very interesting reflection because they are selfless. They don't care about what other people think. So it was nice that they were able to dance according to the music or the feeling. The next one we used was a recitation. So we had a lot of hand gesture names. So for example, if I take Katakamukaha, it's got a lot of syllables in there. So that helps them to pronounce words better. So we used the names of the hand gestures and the words like takita, takadimi, those sort of concepts to help them to learn or to speak better. The other one was obviously the facial emotions to help express. They have flattened facial muscles where expressing is a bit hard. So teaching them to use their face help them to express better. As I mentioned earlier, teaching strategies was one of the main areas of my thesis, and I practiced for 3.5 years with these students who started when they were 7.5 years old, and then now they're 12, getting into teenagers, some of them. For 4 to 5 years they've been with me. So repetition is one of the things. So even if we're teaching them words, by repeating it several times, that helps. Cutting down a bigger sentence into smaller, so breaking the sentence, having some visual flashcards, memories that will prompt them to talk about things. So if I'm talking about walking through a forest, we could just show a lion, could show a tree. So that'll help them to start thinking about words and how to express. So these sort of techniques that has helped, including with Bharatanatyam, learning through Bharatanatyam, as well as with language, has made an immense improvement. Progressive training is an interesting one. So just keep adding. So if we've got this much syllabus to cover, so we've got to go from one step to the other and keep adding new techniques or new ways of doing into the concept, helps them to learn better. The most important, or the important part that I think is critical, is to have a positive enforcement, keeping them into in an environment where they're encouraged, they're always given opportunity to lead something or to learn better, has actually helped them. So this is the last slide for me, and the last question. Any questions?
Yeah, audience, any question for ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
I'm
please,
Maniandan
go
from
ahead
Tamil
with your
Nadu.
question.
Ma'am, I have a small doubt.
Yeah.
The Bharatanatyam may be used the sense of a feeling. Then how can it help to pronounce a word?
Yeah, so how the language side, so Bharatanatyam's got Angika, Vachika, Aharya, and Satvika. So one of the concepts, the main concepts of Bharatanatyam is Vachika, which is expressing through words. Long time ago, a drama and like the musicians were more them singing their own words with saying things was important. So we took that concept into the program of teaching and made sure that the students were able to say the words. Jati, saying the jati or bowls for the dance is one of the main things in when you learn dance. We do teach them how to do with rhythm and to say the words. So that was another concept where we made sure that they were able to talk. So speaking through dance, speaking through language, learning through language was very common in Indian classical dance.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I think that's it, ma'am. You explained it wonderfully well. It was so easy to understand, so I think there's no question.
Thank you so much, madam.
So
Thank you. Thanks.
I have a question. I know we are running late, but I think she's left the meeting. Shall we move on to the
No, I
third
haven't. I'm here.
participant now? With extra consciousness, would they like to be treated like that?
Sorry. So the question was
Yeah.
to me, I assume.
Yeah. That is to you. Do you think the individuals with with Down syndrome must be dealt with extra consciousness? If so, do they not feel bad the way they are treated?
So when we teach them, we make sure that they work with the group. So there's nothing different in the group environment. So it's up to the teacher how we teach, so not to make them feel different. So that is one of the positive enforcement, and making sure that they don't feel different. So everyone's together, so in the class, but without the other students and others knowing, we can actually enhance it by helping them. So we're not showing any difference, but expecting them to learn in an environment that they are comfortable with. So that's important, that each child, it doesn't matter even if you got Down syndrome or not, if you got students about 15 in a class, each child learns differently. So as it's up to the teacher how we explain to them and make sure that different kids learn differently. So making sure that is covered without showing any difference, that's really important. So in one of my slides, I did, which I think wasn't shown before, which actually tells not to show any difference, because that's quite important.
All right. I'm sure doing such a beautiful thing, altogether a different perception to the teaching. So I would like to congratulate you. And with this, we move on to the
Thank you
third
so much.
presenter. Yeah, may I have, I think the third presenter has already shared the screen. Mr. Bhaskar, you may please start.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am? Hello.
Yeah, we can hear
Am
you.
I?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You may please start.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. First of all, good morning to all and all. And thank you, the organizer, for giving me the opportunity to present my paper. And as you can see that the title of my paper is Of Space and Identity, a Critical Analysis of Chandani Lokuge's If the Moon Smiled. Coming to the introduction, in the realm of literature, space is very vast area as it covers a large variety of spaces like physical space, psychological space, geographical space, ideological space, political space, etc. Actually, the space is a multidimensional concept. Space here is not meant in literal way, but it encompasses various dimensions. When we'll try to define a space in literal way, it is found that Homike Bhabha, in his The Location of Culture, used the term the third space while describing the hybridity in post-colonial literature. According to Bhabha, third space is a mode of articulation, a way of describing a productive and not merely reflective space that engenders new possibility. It is an interruptive, interrogative, and enunciative. After that, Henry Lefebvre talks about space, taking it to another level. He categorizes space in three ways: conceived space, perceived space, and lived space. After that comes Edward Soja, who draws on Lefebvre to develop his theories on the space, but he extends the understanding of spatiality in several ways, but that have proved valuable in the study, especially to our understanding of lived space. He spells out importance of positions that are simultaneously centered and marginalized. Under the heading of third space, he incorporates some of the feminist and post-colonial criticism of postmodern geographies by embracing issues articulated in the works of Bell Hooks and Gillian Rose, among others. Thus, the concept of space and spatial theory begins and it opens a new window of criticism. At the same time, through the politics of identity, I will try to explain the way in which characters are presented, depicted in the novel, as well as I will explore how one has to lose her identity and what are the reasons behind this loss of identity and what types of crises they have to face after losing the identity. After losing the identity, one has again to rebuild the identity in a new land, new background, and in a new way. This remaking of identity with the change of space is something very difficult to cope with, to manage, and to adjust with. Naturally, in this process, what happens is that once settled, established life turns to be unsettled. Migration is one of the major events where one loses identity and has been forced to cope with the new environment and background. Mohsin Hamid, in his novel Exit West, aptly puts down the situation of migration as he writes that that is the way of things. For when we migrate, we murder from our lives those we leave behind. This is the quoted line from the novel. Now coming to the novelist, Chandani Lokuge is one of the greatest writers of fiction from Sri Lanka. Presently, she works as an assistant professor in Australian National University. As she is living a diasporic life, she knows its experience at its best. She brilliantly incorporates her experiences in her literary works. Her novel, If the Moon Smiled, brings before us the protagonist Mantri, who, like the novelist, has the experience of living some part of her life in Sri Lanka, and after that she comes to live in Australia, a migrant life far away from home. This novel captures the journey from the protagonist from her motherland to some foreign country, and during the journey she faces the shift of space and various problems relating to it. Let us trace the journey of Mantri, which will unfold the various problems related to space and identity. When the novel opens, the protagonist Mantri has been presented before us as a typical village girl who finds pleasure in the lap of nature. Then she starts to face the patriarchal society as she starts to move to adulthood. Her father, being a representative of the patriarchal believers, advises her, quoted line, you must try to be like that Neelam flower. Her father often says to her, pointing to it, blossom free of the mud in which it is born, unsoiled by it. He softly warns her that she should never deviate from the path of honesty and purity. In other incident where she becomes shocked to know about the hard rules about the woman when she had her menstrual period, she was not allowed to go out or even seen by anyone during those days. She has been confined in a semi-dark room. Thus, the growth of Mantri has been shaped and molded by the patriarchy and their customs of for the society. Now it's time for her marriage. As she grows enough, her marriage has been fixed with Mahendra. Now she starts to gain new experience, that is, of course, marginalization, but now at the hand of her husband and her in-laws. Mantri was sad and oppressed as for the first time she was away from her father's house, but this has been misjudged and misjudged by her husband, and he accuses her for what she has never done. The novelist highlights an important issue, that is virginity test, as it is in practice in some of regions of Sri Lanka. After the first wedding night, Mahendra wakes up in the morning, and when he does not find blood stain on the bedsheet, he starts to accuse her of infidelity, and he asks her, "You have been with another man." This is quoted line. Mantri constantly tries her best to make him understand of her purity, honesty, and virginity, but she fails, and after this incident their relationship becomes loveless, emotionless, feelingless, as Mahendra only visits her for sexual gratification. Apart from that, he does not behave with her properly. To add some more trouble to her situation, Mahendra shifts to Australia, and Mantri would go along with him. This shifts from Sri Lanka to Australia seems to her a horrible journey, as they were not in good terms in their own country. So what is going to happen in foreign country? Edward Said has rightly written, exile is strangely compelling to think about but terrible to experience. It is unhearable, a rift forced between a human being and a native place, between the self and its true home. Its essential sadness can never be surmounted, and while it is true that literature and history contain heroic, romantic, glorious, even triumphant episodes in an exile's life, these are more than efforts meant to overcome the crippling sorrow of estrangement. Now, this is the dilemma of anyone who is going to be migrant. After that, they have settled in foreign land due to biological need. They have become the parents of a daughter Neelam and a son Devaki. Again, we see Mahendra blaming Mantra in a patriarchal voice when both of their children go astray. Actually, the patriarchal custom has given this duty to women. If the children become bad, and if the children become good, the patriarchy would be there to take this credit. We can aptly use behavior to define mantra as one is not born woman, but rather becomes one, becomes woman. After that, she decides to return to her motherland. She stays there doing some social work by teaching the women and the olds, but she has to return to Australia again. But this time, she cannot manage to take the pressure to adjust with the changing environment, but she is psychopatient and she has been taken to mental asylum. There she spends her, there she sends herself flowers on Valentine's Day and Mother's Day to keep remember that she is married and she is mother. Thus, the novel ends with this pathetic note. Uh, by leaving one space with which she was familiar with from her birth, she enters another space with the new identity, and into the process, the narrator Mantri has been oppressed by religion, patriarchy, and migration. The novel depicts her unhappy marriage with Mahendra, her consequent failure as good wife and mother under the pressure of her husband. She leaves Sri Lanka home and migrates to Adelaide. Mantri has to face an ever-increasing sense of alienation and numbness. She realizes life is suddenly private, four walls and semi-darkness. At the very beginning of her life, her mental space has been molded to live like a girl, and her stay at her father's can be explained as a concept space. Her marriage and her conjugal life with Mahendra can be explained as a perceived space, as here she thinks and imagines one kind of conjugal life full of bliss and happiness, but it turns out to be a world of oppression, unhappiness. Her shift from Sri Lanka to Australia can be directly explained as a shift in geographical space, and after that, she attempts to manage in this new space. Finally, the last days of her life that she has spent in mental asylum can be explained as lived space, as this is the emotional experience of a space that develops through the imaginary and lived experiences of perceived and conceived spaces. With the changing of space comes a new type of identity that destroys the previous one. As a child, she plays and enjoys in the village's natural background, but with the coming of puberty, she has been assigned a new identity with certain limitation. After that, after her marriage, she gets a new identity as the wife of Mahendra, but this identity also does not provide her the bliss, the happiness. After that, she moves to Australia with her husband. This also gives her a new identity to establish herself in foreign country. Thus, we can say that the space and identity are intimately connected with the life and existence of Mantri, as when she enters into a new space, she gets a new identity. We can say that throughout the novel, Chandani Lokuge tries to present before us the dominated space that a woman has to face always. This domination starts right from her birth, and her father controls her in the first half. After that, it becomes the duty of her husband to control her, dominate her, oppress her. Thus, the journey of Mantri actually brings before us the spaceless space of women when she has been forced to live in search of open space. And now the works cited, that the works that I have used to frame this article, and this is the end of my presentation. Now it's to you, ma'am.
Any questions for Mr. Bhaskar? Any question for him? Okay. If no one is asking, Mr. Bhaskar, I have a question for you. If we talk about identity, particularly referring to women, is it true that, a lot of literature is indicating towards homelessness is enabling women to acquire identity? How far is it correct? Homelessness or being away from roots or being away from their home is giving them identity. How far is correct? How far is it correct? Quickly answer this because we have to move to the
Okay,
next
sure, ma'am,
presenter.
sure, ma'am. Actually, this is saying that homelessness or away from home gives the woman or a girl a new identity. Actually, this shift depends on where she goes, how she goes, when she goes. And if if she shifts properly from one place to another, in that case, she will gain some kind of identity, but her identity will be somehow be shaped by the patriarchy or the place where she lives or the place with whom she stays. So everything will be there to make her realize that though you are away from home, you are not free, or you are not from the you don't have the freedom to express what you want or what you feel.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhaskar. It was a wonderful presentation. With this, we move on to the next presenter,
Thank you, ma'am.
Chinmoy Deka. The next presenter, Chinmoy Deka. Please excuse me. Don't feel offended because these are proper nouns and sometimes you pronounce them, you mispronounce them. So can we have the next presenter, the fourth presenter? Is Chinmoy Deka present? Do we have Chinmoy Deka here from Assam? Is Dipra Kishore present? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you may please start.
Okay, ma'am. Good morning, madam. PhD Research Scholar, Pogrok Department, Tripura University, Agartala, Tripura. Today, first presentation is of the English language in my life, madam. Are you audible, madam?
Yes, you are audible. You are audible.
Yes,
Please
audible.
continue.
Okay, madam. Just want to share my screen. Madam, you can see.
Yeah, your screen is visible. Yeah, please start.
Okay, thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. My topic is growth and development of Cockroach stories. Coming to the introduction, Cockroach is the native language of Tripura people in Tripura, Northeast India. During 20th centuries, many of royal family and its officials contribute to develop the Cockroach language in many ways. The Tripura state government had recognized Cockroach as a state language in 17 January 1979, or gazetted notification is 19 January. In the beginning, the practice of Cockroach literature were all in oral based. The literature was overflowing in every activities like zooming, traditional housing, guiding in people's living style. We could see the first Cockroach literature in written form, Cockroach grammar, Cock Burma on Tripura Bekaron in 1897. Now, Cockroach story. The first Cockroach story is found in the history of Cockroach literature, true written by Thakur Radha Mohan Dev Burma in 1907. Nagendra Jamatia's Hata is the first short story books published in 1978 on the Cockbrook of the Cockbrook literature. We can see the first collection of short stories book in Cockbrook as Dundrukma, written by Samlal Devbarma in now is growth in development. Ancient period. Ancient period from 1897 to 1945 is all the events we know since the beginning of Janashika Samiti. During this period, we have found four Cockbrook writers, namely Dulat Ahmad, Muhammad Umar, Thakurada Mohan Devbarma, and Sadhukusi Krishna Tripura. We can see the first Cockbrook literature in written form, Cockburma Ong Tripura Bekaron, written by Dulat Ahmad and Muhammad Umar in 1897. After Dulat Ahmad, Cockbrook literature was further developed by Thakurada Mohan Devbarma. He wrote three books, Cockburma, Troipur Bekaron, 1900, Troipur Kothamala, 1906, and Troipur Basabidan, 1907 dictionary. Thakurada Mohan Devbarma's books, Troipur Kothamala is the first to be found in Cockbrook short story. These names are Madhav, Radha, Mohini, Sudamani, and Bukuknai. Although these stories are short, the author's life story also paints a different pictures of the Triprasa's people living in a society. Now, medieval period. Second, the period of Janashika Samiti movement from 1945 to 1979 can be called as the period of medieval in the history of Cockbrook literature. The Janashika Samiti movement in Tripura had a major impact during this period and extends until 1979. In order to be free from prejudice, the Janashika Samiti movement was formed. The educated young men, 11 members in the committee, comprised of Sudhanath Devbarma, President, Dasrath Devbarma, Vice President, Hemanta Devbarma, Secretary, Agur Devbarma, Acting Secretary, Nilmohan Devbarma, etc. The teachings of their movements were among the people in the village and hill Tripura. As a result, significantly a chance to play in the field of education, culture, literature, and some kind of consequences happen in the history of Tripura. Many thinkers and scholars have edited Cockbrook literary magazine such as Sudhanath Devbarma's Kotalkothama, 1954, Samlal Devbarma, Ani Tripura, 1969, Debrata Koloi, Horzlai, 1975, Dasrath Devbarma Lama, 1978, Samlal Devbarma, Tripura Koktu, 1978, Manoranjan Bubar, etc. The man had experienced many writers took up the pen in the creation of Cockbrook literature. Many Cockbrook short stories have come up during this period. We find Aswathama Jamatia's Mamala Musa Samani in 1974, which was published in Bishamganj High School. This short story is an old traditional black based on love story of a pair who could never unite, was given a new treatment with a new dimension in the present context. Pavitra Rani Jamatia's Raima's 1979 was about the pain and suffering of two sisters, Raima and Sharma, caused by the irresponsible parents published in Cockbrook literary magazines of Soba, edited by Nagendra Jamatia. The story tells about the zooming in the hills where there is no traditional house guarding to rest and have food. The story also shows about the seeking for accommodations in two separate places. Other short stories is Nagendra Jamatia's Pailema Kuri Burui and Cotton, 1979, Dungur, Literary Magazine. Minalkanti Devarma's Kasan is 1979. Before that, we could find two short stories in the literary magazine Katal Kothoma, edited by Sudhana Devarma. These short stories are Ramcharan Devarma's Nukmi Hamzuk and Manmohan Devarma's Bayab. Although many Ryan's poems, songs, dramas, and novels were created, but the Cockroach short stories did not publish in the form of an obvious book at that time. Besides that, we also see the short story Hatairai by Nagendra Jamatias in 1973. This story was published in 1978 in the form of a book named Hatairai along with three other short stories, Athugrai, Shilpi, and Homsang, and two essays, Zomatelu Kubisingo Cherai Lemung and Khitor. In this story, the author painted pictures of Tiprasa people like Hatairai who lost everything to refugee in their own soil. The stories of this book are very popular and every story is the treasures of time. However, Hatai books cannot be called a complete of short story book. Now, modern period. Since 1979, the present time can be called a modern period. History reveals that the PUJ's organizations contributed to the development of the Cockroach language. Under the pressures of these organizations, Cockroach became one of the states of language in we can see the first collect of stories book in Cockroach Dundrukma was published in 1984. There are 12 short stories which represent the materialistic and diverse history of Tiprasa society. Therefore, it can be said that the stories of this book are based on the real life of Tiprasa society with a very ideal and mature characters. Century the entrance in the tellers. Another short story is Adong was published in the year 1987. There are 8 short stories and 8 authors. Many stories were extremely rich and high quality in nature. The female storyteller Mongolshori Deborma in her story 10 pictures of standing up against superstitions. Although the practice of dowry did not exist in ancient society, we see that a gradual and with the outside. This story the author have told the true story of a householder who lost his own land due to exploitations and become destitute. The stories actually depict different aspects of Tiprasa people in livelihood. There is no doubt that Samlal Devarma is one of the unique storytellers in the history of Cockroach literature. He decorated the of his can see this kind of picture in his short story Soba Kaishanugulo in 1995, where the highlights that the people has stood up the territories as if to live in her own freedom. After Samla Devarma, we can see Haripada Devarma, Sunil Devarma, Dori Devarma, Dr. Atul Devarma, Utpal Devarma, etc. of the quality and high quality storytellers with interest with something existing of emotional finds a way to make readers care about the thoughts being told. These storytellers have won many awards for their high quality in nature. In 1999, writer Sivarai Choudhury received the Soler Krishna Award for his story Bial in 2000. Writer Haripada Devarma received the Soler Krishna Award for his story Jalai Tokupu in 2000. Writer Ravindra Kishore Devarma received the Soler Krishna Award for his story Hasuk Nimukti in 2011. Writer Sunil Devarma received the Vishwadev Bhattacharya Award for his story Jorani Buthai in 2011. Writer Utpal Devarma received the Bhishmadev Bhattacharya Award for his story Diling in 2015, etc. A high quality and every popular in all the short stories book mentioned will be a very good place to sit next to the story literature in any developed language. Now, list of
Sir,
at present.
hello, excuse
Yes,
me,
madam.
Dipra
Yes,
sir.
madam. Yes,
You'll have to
madam.
go a little fast. Yeah, you'll have to go a little
Okay,
fast
okay, madam.
because the
Okay, madam.
next technical session has to start.
Okay, madam. Just finish, madam. Always finish. At present, the Cockroach short stories books of Cockroach literature was around 90. Conclusion. From the above discussion, we know that these short story books, the zoom cultivation in the hills as guiding traditional house, the nature, the animals, cultures, birth, death, deprivation, happiness, sorrow, struggle, movement, the acceleration of the Mahajans, the culture of the society, superstitions, manners, as well as life in the city, improved living conditions, science and technology have been given a place in short stories. In addition to that, some of the high-quality Cockroach short stories are at a modern stage, translated into Bengali, Hindi, and English, etc., which can be drawing that Cockroach short stories will eventually continue to evolve and evolve around the world, gaining recognition as a short story is other language. Hambai. Thank you, madam.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful way of saying thank you. I really liked it. So, do we have any questions for sir, for Mr. Dipra? So, anybody from the audience, if has a question for him? All right. So, I think they have really liked your presentation and the way you have explained. That has been beautiful. So, with this, we would like to conclude this session and the first technical session. Those who are here for the technical session 2, they will be here only. So I would like to, before I end and I just leave the meeting, I would like to thank St. John's College of Arts in collaboration, who organized this beautiful platform, who gave us such a beautiful platform to have a deliberation on the contemporary, literary themes, diverse ideas we heard in technical session 1. This was in collaboration with Cape Comorian Trust India, Cape Comorian publisher. I would like to thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here to share this, intellectual platform where I could also, be informed about what is happening around, and you open new vistas of research for all of us. Thank you so much. And with this, I would like to conclude technical session 1. Thank you. Thank you so much.